I never thought the day would come when I'd feel the ground under my own feet again. For 10 long years I woke up every morning knowing my legs wouldn't respond, knowing the wheelchair was the only way I could move through life. But the strange part isn't that I finally stood up after a decade. It's that the very first thing I felt wasn't joy, it was fear. And that fear pushed me to hide the truth from the very people who loved me the most. That's where this story begins, with a secret heavy enough to break a family, and a miracle I didn't know how to explain. The night everything changed was quiet, the kind of stillness that usually made me feel small. My room had the same familiar layout, the bed pushed against the wall, the old pictures of my childhood taped beside the window, and the chair parked in its usual place like a loyal shadow. I wasn't expecting anything different that night. Honestly, I had stopped expecting anything at all. After 10 years of physical therapy, failed surgeries, and endless encouragement from doctors who eventually lost their spark, hope felt like something I couldn't afford to carry anymore. But life has a strange way of shifting when you least expect it. It started with a feeling in my toes. At first, I thought I imagined it. A tiny tingling sensation like when your foot falls asleep. I shook my head and closed my eyes, thinking maybe I was dreaming with my eyes open again. But then it happened again, stronger, sharper, impossible to ignore. My breath caught in my throat. For years I'd tried to move my toes, my legs, anything below my waist, and nothing ever responded. But this time something did. I didn't scream. I didn't call anyone. I just stared at my feet as if they didn't belong to me. My hands shook while I leaned forward, gripping my legs with the kind of desperation you only feel once in your life. Slowly, carefully, I tried lifting my heel. What happened next didn't feel real. My foot moved. And then it moved again. A small shift, a small miracle, but it might as well have been the earth shaking under me. I didn't sleep that night. My heart raced, my mind spun, and every minute felt like a lifetime. When morning finally came, I forced myself to try standing up. My palms were sweating. My whole body trembled. I held the side of the bed, pulled myself up, and somehow, I stood. 10 years of being paralyzed, 10 years of watching other people walk, run, dance, live freely, and there I was, standing on my own legs like I had never lost them. But instead of shouting for my mom, instead of calling my brother, instead of telling my best friend who had pushed my wheelchair through every hard day, I froze. I felt guilt hit me like a wave. I knew what this miracle meant to them. They had prayed for this moment, cried for it, begged for it. They had carried me physically and emotionally when I couldn't carry myself. But I also knew what this miracle meant for me. After 10 years of being treated gently, protected, watched over, and pitted, standing up felt like stepping into an entirely new world, one I wasn't sure I was ready for. So I sat back down. I grabbed the wheelchair handles. And when my mom opened the door to bring me breakfast, I pretended nothing had changed. I told myself I needed time. Time to understand how I could suddenly walk. Time to figure out if the strength would last or disappear as quickly as it came. Time to feel like myself again. But deep down, the truth was more complicated. I was scared of how everyone would react. I was scared they'd question me, doubt me, or worse, think I had been hiding strength from them all along. I didn't want to break their trust. I didn't want to hurt them. And I didn't want the pressure of explaining a miracle even the doctors couldn't predict. For weeks, I practiced walking only at night. Slowly at first, then with more confidence. Every step felt like reclaiming a life I had already grieved. I still used the wheelchair during the day, still let my family push me around the house, still listened to their soft encouragement and careful instructions. I knew it wasn't fair, but I convinced myself that revealing the truth too early would only create chaos. I thought I was protecting them. I thought I was protecting myself. But hiding something so big from the people closest to you begins to change the way you breathe. Every conversation felt tense. Every time someone walked behind me, I worried they'd see the way my legs twitched. Every time I stood up at night, I feared a door would open. My secret became a second shadow, following me everywhere, whispering reminders that I was living two different lives under the same roof. My mom, being the kind of mother who always felt things before they were said, began noticing little details. She started asking questions, soft at first, then sharper. My brother started watching me closely too, confused by the new confidence in my voice. I avoided their eyes, afraid they'd see the truth spilling out of me. I kept telling myself I'd confess soon, that I'd find the perfect moment to sit them down and explain everything. But I waited too long. I waited until the night everything finally fell apart. It happened on a day that started normally, a day that felt routine and safe. But miracles don't stay hidden forever, and secrets, especially life-changing ones, have a way of revealing themselves in the worst moments possible. Something happened that evening, something that forced me to choose between the lie I was living and the truth I had been running from. And when that moment came, when the truth rushed forward like a storm I couldn't stop, everything changed, not just for me but for my entire family. What happened that night is the part of the story I've never told before. The part that nearly destroyed everything but also rebuilt what I thought was lost forever. And that is where the real story begins. I didn't sleep the night everything shifted inside me. Even after the secret nearly came out, my mind kept replaying every moment from the past 10 years. The hospital lights, the slow goodbyes to my old life, the faces of people who tried to stay strong for me even when I couldn't. Maybe that's why I'm sharing this part now, the background no one else knew, the weight behind the fear that made me hide the truth. Because nothing about this story makes sense unless you understand where it all began, and why standing up again felt like stepping into a storm instead of a miracle. Before the accident, my life was loud and full of motion. I used to run everywhere, even when walking would have been enough. My mom would always yell after me to slow down before I hurt myself. My brother used to challenge me to races across the yard, even though he was older and stronger. Back then, I thought nothing could stop me. I never imagined a world where my legs would refuse to move, where simple things like getting out of bed or crossing a room would become battles I couldn't win. But all it took was one bad moment. One sudden event that everyone kept calling an accident, even though the word felt too small for the pain it caused. I don't like to describe that day in detail, it still twists my stomach, but I remember waking up in a hospital room with bright white walls and voices that sounded far away. I remember trying to move and feeling nothing. I remember the look in my mom's eyes when the doctor told her I might never walk again. It wasn't shock. It was heartbreak. They didn't give up on me in those early months. My family pushed every boundary, called every specialist, tried every therapy. I went along with all of it, even when the exhaustion felt heavier than my own body. But as the months turned into years, optimism faded. Not because anyone stopped loving me, but because the world kept moving fast while my life stayed stuck in place. And I learned to accept the stillness. At least I thought I did. Some people say paralysis changes you, but really, it reveals you. It reveals who stands by you and who drifts away. It reveals how strong you can be when you have no choice. And it reveals how much you can hide behind a smile when people don't know the pain you carry. I watched friends slowly stop visiting, watched invitations dry up, watched my brother age into someone more serious and protective. I saw my mom turn her life into a schedule centered around me, like she couldn't breathe unless she heard me call her name. So when I suddenly felt movement again after 10 years, movement no one expected, movement no doctor ever predicted, it wasn't just a miracle. It was a disruption. A change big enough to shake every part of my life. And the fear of what that change would do to my family became stronger than the joy of walking again. The days after the secret almost slipped out were the hardest. I kept hearing my mom's voice when she had snapped at me earlier, asking why I seemed different. I kept remembering the way my brother had looked at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. Suspicious, confused, searching for something he couldn't explain. I knew they felt a shift even if they didn't understand it yet. So I tried to act normal. I forced myself to stay in the wheelchair longer during the day, even though my legs were getting stronger with every secret step. I pretended I needed help getting into bed, even though my body didn't ache the way it used to. I lowered my voice, slowed my movements, tried to keep my heartbeat from racing every time someone walked into the room. The pressure of pretending was exhausting. Sometimes I felt like I was carrying my entire secret on my shoulders, terrified it would slip out of me if I breathed too deeply. But even with all the fear, curiosity started building inside me. Why now? Why after 10 years? What changed in my body? Why did the doctors never see this coming? At night, after everyone slept, I Googled every possible reason, reading stories of rare recoveries and strange cases where nerves healed long after doctors gave up hope. Some stories brought comfort, others brought more confusion. But none of them explained what was happening to me. The more I researched, the more questions I had. Some nights I thought about going back to the doctor, telling them everything, hoping they'd give me answers. But then I remembered how many times my family had heard false hope from those same doctors. How many times they cried after being told there was progress when there wasn't. How many times I promised them I was okay even when I was breaking inside. I didn't want to lead them into another cycle of hope and disappointment. I needed to be sure before I told them anything. So the secret stayed a secret. As days turned into weeks, the tension in the house grew heavier. My mom kept checking on me more often, asking small questions hidden inside casual conversations. My brother hovered around me like he was waiting for something to happen. I could feel the air between us change, tight, uncomfortable, ready to snap at the slightest movement. And the worst part was knowing that I had caused it, even though I never meant to. One evening, while the sun was setting, I heard my mom talking to my brother in the kitchen. Their voices were low, but the walls carried sound too easily in our house. She said she felt like something was off with me, like I wasn't telling the truth. She wondered if I was depressed again or hiding pain. My brother whispered back that he noticed something too, but he couldn't explain it. He said he felt like I was pulling away. Hearing their worry made my chest tighten. They were scared for me and I was the reason. That night I sat by my window, feeling the weight of every choice I had made. I told myself I would reveal the truth soon. I just needed the right moment. I needed courage. I needed something. But before I could decide anything, something else happened. Something I never saw coming, something that made the tension in the house twist into something even more dangerous. It started with a noise in the hallway. A soft sound like someone shifting their weight, then a sharp gasp, too sharp to ignore. I froze. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't practicing walking. I was simply standing beside my bed, stretching my legs quietly in the dark. And someone saw me. Or at least, someone saw enough to know something was wrong. I heard footsteps run back down the hall, fast and uneven. My heart dropped. My secret wasn't just cracking, it was seconds away from breaking wide open. And that moment, that small sound in the hallway, became the beginning of everything that followed. The part of the story where silence turned into confrontation. Where fear turned into confusion. Where my miracle stopped being mine alone. But what happened next, what I found when I stepped out into the hallway, changed everything in a way I wasn't ready for. And that part, that's where the real danger began. When I opened my bedroom door after hearing that sudden gasp in the hallway, the house felt different. The air was thick, almost heavy, like the walls themselves knew something had shifted. I couldn't see anyone at first, just the dim glow from the nightlight near the bathroom. The quiet felt unnatural. My heartbeat thumped so loudly I wondered if it would give me away before anyone else did. I stepped forward slowly, trying to make sure my footsteps were silent. My legs were steady, but my mind wasn't. Every step reminded me that I shouldn't be walking at all. Not in their eyes, not in their understanding of my reality, not after 10 years of being paralyzed. The hallway felt too long, too exposed, and every shadow made me tense. I kept thinking about who could have been there. My mom? My brother? Someone else? Or maybe I imagined the sound. But deep down I knew I didn't. At the end of the hallway I spotted a faint movement. Someone had gone into the living room and left the door halfway open. I froze. A part of me wanted to go back to my room, sit in the wheelchair, pretend nothing happened, pretend I was still the person they knew. But another part of me, the part that had fought quietly for 10 years, pushed me to move forward. I walked to the living room and saw my brother sitting on the couch, hunched over, elbows on his knees, hands gripping his hair like he was holding onto a secret that was too heavy. He didn't notice me at first. His shoulders were trembling slightly, like he wasn't sure if what he saw was real or some kind of illusion. When he finally looked up, his eyes didn't blink. They were wide, stunned, almost frightened. I stopped immediately. Neither of us spoke. The silence stretched between us like a wire ready to snap. He didn't shout. He didn't call Mom. He didn't even stand. He just stared at me like I wasn't his sibling anymore, like I was someone else entirely. I stepped back without thinking, suddenly scared of being seen. And that's when he whispered, voice low and unsteady, "How long?" The words hit me like a punch. My legs felt weak, not from disability but from fear. I didn't answer. My throat tightened, and for a moment I wished I really had been imagining things. But this was real. Too real. And I wasn't ready. He stood up slowly, almost painfully. "I'm not angry," he said, though his voice cracked in a way that made me doubt it. I don't understand. I need you to tell me something." But I couldn't. Not there. Not with my secret half unraveled and the night still holding its breath around us. I shook my head, stepped back again, and before he could say anything else, I turned and walked back toward my room. I didn't run. But my steps were fast enough to tell him the truth he already knew. I could walk, and I had been hiding it from everyone. I shut the door behind me quietly, my pulse racing. My wheelchair sat in the corner, waiting like a silent reminder of the world I had been pretending to live in. I sat down on the bed, covered my face with my hands and tried to breathe, but the guilt pressed down harder than ever before. Down the hallway I heard my brother's footsteps pacing. No shouting. No calling Mom. Just pacing. Thinking. Processing. And that scared me more than anger ever could. Silence is powerful, especially when it holds questions someone is too hurt or too confused to ask out loud. The next day nothing felt normal. My brother avoided looking at me during breakfast. My mom moved around the kitchen like she sensed something was off but didn't know what. I stayed in the wheelchair all morning even though it felt heavier than usual, like the lie inside it grew every minute. At one point, my brother brushed past me and I heard him breathe out quietly, "We need to talk, later." Not now. Not in front of Mom. Not with emotions still raw. But later. That single word held 1,000 possibilities, none of which I was ready for. As the day went on, the tension spread through the house. Even my mom started acting distant, confused by the sudden strange energy she could feel but not explain. She kept asking if everyone was okay, but neither of us answered clearly. I felt horrible knowing I was breaking the peace she tried so hard to protect. By afternoon, I escaped outside for some fresh air. The backyard felt different now, like freedom mixed with fear. I walked quietly between the trees, careful not to leave footprints in the softer soil. I had gotten used to walking at night where everything stayed hidden. Being outside during the day made the risk too real. Anyone could see. A neighbor. A friend. Someone passing by. And then everything would unravel before I was ready. As I stood behind the shed, my mind replayed the moment in the hallway. That sharp gasp. That single second that changed everything. I kept wondering, why didn't I lock the door? Why wasn't I more careful? Why didn't I confess earlier before someone found out in the worst way? The more I thought about it, the more tangled everything became. But the main conflict wasn't just about hiding the truth anymore. It was about what would happen next. How would my brother react once he had time to think? Would he confront me angrily? Would he tell Mom himself? Would he demand answers I still didn't have? And then there was another question I kept avoiding, one that grew louder in my mind with every passing day. What if my ability to walk wasn't permanent? What if this miracle was temporary? What if I told my family, lifted their hearts, gave them joy, only for everything to crumble again? The fear of losing the miracle felt as strong as the miracle itself. But my brother wasn't the only person who had begun noticing things. Over the next few days, small moments started stacking up. Moments I couldn't ignore. My mom noticed me lifting myself slightly faster than usual. My brother caught me standing to reach something I claimed I couldn't. Even my best friend, who visited once in a while, looked confused when she hugged me and felt muscles in my legs tense in ways they hadn't in years. The lies were slipping, cracking. And with each crack, the danger grew. One evening, while I was in my room stretching my legs secretly again, I heard my mom talking softly on the phone. Her voice shook. She said she felt like something big was happening with me, something she couldn't understand, something she wasn't sure she was ready for. She wondered if I was hiding pain, or depression, or some kind of health problem I was too scared to share. Hearing her voice tremble made my chest ache. I didn't want her to worry. I didn't want her to assume the worst. But I also didn't want to walk into the living room and announce, "Surprise, I've been hiding a miracle." The longer I waited, the harder the truth became. One night, my brother finally knocked on my door. Not loudly, not angrily, just firmly, like he had made a decision. I could feel the moment settling around us like a shadow. When I opened the door, he didn't come inside. He just stood there, looking at me with eyes that had too many questions and not enough patience left. "We need to talk," he said again, voice low. "And this time you can't walk away." But before I could speak, before I could explain anything, we heard our mom calling us from the kitchen. Her voice sounded urgent, worried, maybe even scared. My brother looked toward the kitchen, then back at me. The fear in his eyes wasn't about me walking anymore. It was about whatever was happening in that moment. We both rushed toward the sound. And when we entered the kitchen, what we found waiting for us took the entire story into a direction none of us expected. One that made my secret feel small compared to what was coming next. When my brother and I rushed into the kitchen, my mom was standing in the center of the room, her hands shaking slightly as she held her phone. She wasn't crying, but the worry in her eyes was deep, almost panicked. The lights above her flickered for a moment, and the whole room felt colder than it should have. She looked from him to me, her gaze lingering on my face as if she sensed the storm building inside our family but didn't know the cause. "There's something I need to tell you both," she said softly, almost whispering. Her voice wavered like she wasn't sure how to say the words. My brother shot me a look, a mixture of confusion and fear that she somehow knew everything. For a second I thought this was the moment. The confrontation. The collapse of the secret I'd been carrying. My heart hammered so hard I felt it in my throat. But she wasn't talking about me. Not yet. She set the phone on the table and took a deep breath. "Your aunt just called. She said someone dropped by her place earlier, asking questions about us." Mom swallowed hard. "About you." The air shifted instantly. My brother straightened. I froze. Mom ran a hand through her hair, pacing a little. She said the person claimed they were doing research for a medical study. "They wanted details about your condition. About what the doctors tried, about our family history. She paused, looking directly at me. That's not normal. My stomach twisted. A stranger asking things about my paralysis, about my past, about treatments that ended years ago. None of it made sense. And yet, somehow, it didn't feel like a coincidence. Not with everything happening inside our house. Not with the timing so close to the night my brother saw me standing. My brother stepped closer to Mom. Did she say what they looked like? She shook her head. Just that they were polite. Too polite. And they didn't give a name. I swallowed hard. Something about this felt wrong. Like someone out there knew more about me than they should. Like someone was watching for a reason I hadn't figured out yet. And suddenly the miracle didn't feel private, it felt exposed. Mom rubbed her temples, clearly distressed. I don't know how they knew where your aunt lives. I don't know how they knew anything about us. She looked back at me. And I don't know why they said they needed updates. My brother's eyes darted to mine immediately. Updates. That word hit him harder than me. I could see the realization forming in his mind, a dangerous thought that made him tense. He knew something was happening with me. He had seen me standing. He had heard the crack in my voice the past few days. And now he had another piece of a puzzle he didn't yet understand. Mom started pacing again. I told her to call me immediately if they come back. I told her not to give out anything else. But I can feel something isn't right. Something's coming. The tension in the room tightened, like the air itself was watching us. Later that night, after Mom finally went to bed, my brother knocked on my door again. Firmer this time, more urgent. When I opened it, he stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. He didn't sit. He didn't look away. He just stood there, breathing hard, hands clenched. You have to tell me what's going on, he said quietly, but his voice carried more force than shouting ever could. I know what I saw that night. And now someone is asking questions about you? About the accident? About your condition? This isn't random. My chest tightened. I knew he was right. I knew I couldn't keep pretending everything was normal. But how could I begin to explain something I didn't fully understand myself? How could I tell him I had been walking for weeks while he pushed my wheelchair every morning? How could I confess that I hid everything out of fear, not of them but of what would come after? I need time, I whispered. He shook his head sharply. Time's what got us here. Whatever you're hiding, it's connected to all of this. I can feel it. He stepped closer, lowering his voice even more. If you're in danger, you have to tell me. The word danger made my stomach drop. I hadn't considered it before. I thought the biggest threat was losing my family's trust. I thought the conflict was inside our home. But now, with a stranger asking questions, with my mom pacing like something heavy was coming, everything felt bigger, darker. My brother sighed, frustrated and worried. Fine. If you're not ready to talk, then at least promise me one thing. His eyes locked onto mine. Don't stand. Don't walk. Not tonight. Not until we figure out what's happening. I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could answer, we heard a soft noise from outside, like gravel shifting under footsteps. We both turned toward the window. The curtains were closed, but the sound came again, slower this time, controlled, like someone was trying not to be noticed. My brother moved first. He crossed the room quietly and peeked through the side of the curtains. His body stiffened instantly. Someone's outside. My heart thudded. Who? He didn't answer at first. His breathing changed. Then he whispered, they're just standing there, looking at the house. A chill crawled up my spine. My mind raced through every possibility. A neighbor? A delivery person? Someone lost? Or the same person who went to my aunt? My brother stepped back from the window. Stay here. Don't move. But before he took another step, the footsteps outside began again, faster this time, circling the side of the house. He reached for the door, but I grabbed his arm. Wait. His eyes shot to mine, fear, confusion, and anger mixed together. We can't just stand here. But I didn't want him walking into something unknown. And I didn't want my mom waking up to find strangers near our house in the middle of the night. The footsteps stopped suddenly. The silence that followed was so sharp it made the hairs on my arms rise. My brother leaned closer to the window again, trying to catch another glimpse. A soft knock echoed through the house. Not on my bedroom door. Not on the back door. But on our front door. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. My brother froze. I felt my breath catch. The whole house seemed to hold still, as if waiting for us to react. The knocks came again. My mom's voice floated down the hallway. Who's at the door? My brother glanced at me with wide eyes. Stay in here, he whispered, and before I could stop him, he hurried out. I sat on the edge of my bed, my legs trembling, not from weakness but from fear. I could hear voices in the distance, muffled, tense. My brother asking, "Can I help you?" My mom stepping closer. A stranger's voice too soft to understand. Then something slammed against the doorframe. Not violent, but urgent. Like someone pushing forward. My brother raised his voice, demanding answers. Mom sounded frightened. I stood up without thinking. My body moved before my mind could stop it. I made it halfway to the door before I realized the truth. This moment was the one I'd been avoiding. The one where my secret, my miracle, my fear, everything, was about to collide with a force none of us fully understood. And the next word spoken in the hallway made my heart drop so fast I felt dizzy. The stranger finally spoke loud enough for me to hear. "We know what happened. And we need to talk to your child, now." The tension in the room thickened the moment the last words were spoken, and for a brief second, everyone just stared at each other, trying to process what had been revealed. But before anyone could react, another knock echoed through the hallway, sharp, impatient, and nothing like the hesitant tapping from earlier. It made everyone freeze. The air shifted. Even the house felt different, as if it sensed another storm approaching. When the door swung open, the atmosphere flipped completely. A tall woman stepped inside, carrying a slim folder and wearing an expression that suggested she had been holding on to the truth for far too long. No one recognized her, but something about her presence felt connected to everything, almost too connected. She introduced herself calmly, though her eyes flickered with urgency. What she carried wasn't just paperwork, it was another twist in the conflict that none of them were prepared for. She explained that the situation with the family property, inheritance, and hidden decisions was more complicated than what they had already discovered. And as she spoke, every sentence chipped away at what little certainty the family had left. She revealed that someone else had been involved behind the scenes for years, quietly influencing decisions, signatures, and documents. The shock rippled through the room like a current. It wasn't just a misunderstanding anymore, it was a layered conflict built on secrets carefully tucked away. And now those secrets were unraveling faster than anyone could stop them. As her words continued to unfold, the energy in the house shifted from confusion to disbelief. One of the family members, who had remained quiet until now, suddenly stepped forward with a pale face. He claimed that he knew the mysterious name mentioned in the folder and had kept quiet because he assumed it no longer mattered. But now, with everything out in the open, his silence looked more like guilt. The family's frustration turned toward him, the weight of suspicion pressing down so heavily he could barely breathe. Still, the woman insisted there was more, something even he might not know. And just like that, the stakes rose higher than before. The emotions in the room swirled, anger, hurt, distrust, each pushing the story deeper into uncertainty. The folder contained not only revised documents but also messages, old recordings, and notes that hinted at someone manipulating the family's decisions all along. Suddenly the earlier conflict seemed like only a small piece of a larger puzzle. The family realized they weren't just dealing with a misunderstanding or a simple betrayal. They were up against a hidden strategy designed to divide them. And whoever orchestrated it was still out there, still influencing things from the shadows. Suspense tightened its grip as they flipped through each page, finding one clue after another that linked back to someone none of them expected. Every revelation brought new questions and fewer answers. The estate they were fighting over, the emotional tension, the long-buried arguments, all of it now felt like the surface of something deeper. And although they were desperate for clarity, the truth seemed to twist further away with every detail they discovered. The woman warned them that this wasn't the final twist. There was another layer waiting, one she hadn't yet opened. But she didn't explain it. She only said they needed to prepare themselves. As the room filled with hushed breaths and anxious glances, they all sensed the same thing. The climax of this family drama was approaching, but not gently. The next revelation wouldn't just shock them. It would change everything they thought they knew. And before anyone could gather their thoughts, the woman closed the folder slowly as if sealing the tension inside it, and insisted they all sit down because the truth, the real truth, was about to become far more complicated than any of them imagined. The suspense around the family drama, inheritance emotions, and the shocking twist hung in the air like a final warning, pulling them deeper into a conflict none of them saw coming, pushing the story toward a climax filled with uncertainty and emotional stakes that could alter the family forever. When the tension from the climax finally settled, the family stayed in the living room longer than they expected. No one rushed to leave. It felt like everyone needed a few more minutes to breathe, to let the truth sink in, and to quietly adjust to the new reality. For years they had been living with misunderstandings, secrets, and assumptions. Now, for the first time, everything was on the table. There was something strangely comforting about that clarity, even if it came with a lot of emotions. The house felt warmer, softer, as if the weight that had been pressing on its walls for so long had finally lifted. The person who had caused most of the hidden chaos stepped forward once more. Their confession earlier had been honest, but now they looked even more vulnerable. They apologized again, this time not out of pressure but out of genuine remorse. They said they never meant to cause harm. They were afraid of the family drifting apart and thought they could fix things by controlling them. They admitted it was wrong. They admitted it was selfish. But they also shared how lonely and overwhelmed they felt trying to carry everything alone. Hearing that revealed another layer to the whole story, a reminder that people often make mistakes when they are scared or hurting. Instead of meeting the apology with anger, the family surprised themselves. They listened. They forgave slowly, not instantly but honestly. It wasn't a perfect moment, but it was real. One sibling reached out, then another, until the room felt like a place where healing was finally possible. The conflict that once felt like a mountain standing between them now felt like something they could eventually climb over together. The conversation then shifted to the grandmother's hidden clause in the will. It was the part that still echoed in everyone's mind. Knowing she had foreseen their distance and created a plan to bring them back together added a bittersweet feeling. They talked about her soft strength, her love, and how she always seemed to understand people deeper than they understood themselves. Someone mentioned that maybe this was her final gift. Not the property, not the inheritance, but the truth that forced them to face each other honestly. As the evening went on, they started addressing smaller issues they had ignored for years. Long-standing disagreements. Misunderstood words. Unspoken resentments. One by one they brought them into the light. Not to argue but to finally clear them. It was emotional, but it was exactly what they needed. The subplots that had been silently fueling tension finally found their closure. Siblings who barely spoke to each other shared memories of childhood. Cousins who avoided each other laughed again. Even the quietest members of the family opened up in ways no one expected. Later that night they made one more decision, something simple but powerful. They agreed to visit their grandmother's house together one last time before making any final choices about what to do with it. The house wasn't just a property, it held their memories, their mistakes, and now their healing. Walking through it as a united family felt like the right way to close that chapter. They planned to gather the next morning, cook her favorite dishes, and spend the day remembering her not with grief but with gratitude. When the next day arrived, the house felt different. The sunlight came through the windows brighter than it had in years. Maybe it was just their imagination, but it felt as if the house itself had been waiting for them to come back, not as individuals but as a family. They walked through each room slowly, sharing stories, laughing and sometimes tearing up. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't heavy. It was healing in the simplest, most human way. In the living room they found an old photo album none of them remembered seeing before. Inside were pictures of all of them at different stages of life. Birthdays, graduations, holidays, random moments that would have been forgotten if someone hadn't captured them. At the back of the album, tucked between 2 pages, was a handwritten note. It wasn't dramatic or long. It simply said, "Family survives truth. Stay close." The handwriting was unmistakably their grandmother's. The note wasn't dated and no one knew when she wrote it, but it felt like the perfect final message. That moment tied everything together. It wasn't about the property, the inheritance conflict, or the hidden secrets anymore. It was about staying connected. It was about understanding that even when mistakes happen, love can still rebuild what was broken. By the afternoon, they all sat around the dining table, sharing food and plans for the future. They decided to sell the property, but only after creating a scholarship fund in their grandmother's name using part of the proceeds. It felt like something she would be proud of, a way to honor her while doing something meaningful for others. The rest of the financial decisions were made calmly, with everyone agreeing and respecting each other's needs. It was the kind of cooperation they hadn't experienced in years. As the day came to an end, they stood outside the house together. The sky was turning gold, and the air had the kind of quiet that feels peaceful instead of tense. One by one, they hugged each other. It wasn't forced. It wasn't awkward. It felt like the true ending to everything they had been through. On the drive home, the main character reflected on everything: the conflicts, the secrets, the emotional weight, and the unexpected twist in the grandmother's will. They thought about how the truth had been painful but necessary. It had broken them for a moment, but it also brought them back in a way nothing else could. The takeaway was simple but powerful: families aren't perfect. People make mistakes, sometimes big ones. But healing starts when the truth comes out, when people choose understanding over anger, and when forgiveness becomes stronger than fear. The story had started with conflict, hidden motives, and emotional distance, but it ended with clarity, unity, and a new beginning for all of them. When they reached home, there was no heaviness left, just a quiet sense of peace and the feeling that their grandmother's final wish had come true. The story ended not with a dramatic moment, but with the gentle realization that sometimes the most meaningful endings are the ones that leave you hopeful, grounded, and ready to move forward with a full heart.